A few years ago, I was subscribed to a YouTube channel called Down the Rabbit Hole by, no, it's called Frederick Knudsen, that was his name, but the show is called Down the Rabbit Hole. And he made a lot of good videos. He made one about Chris Chan that I liked. He made one about furries that was pretty interesting. But one of the ones he made was about a YouTuber named DarkSydePhil. And that was kind of one of my least favorite of his, because there wasn't really a whole lot of meat on the bone at that time, I think, with DarkSydePhil. He was a lol cow, he was a gamer, he kind of was bad at video games, and he would blame the other people for him being bad, and he did a lot of begging, and I don't know, I didn't know much about him until I came here to Washington, because that's pretty much all I knew about DarkSydePhil. But then I started hanging out with my friend's cousin, and he showed me all the lore around DarkSydePhil, a lot of it that's happened since then. Like, for instance, how DarkSydePhil has been lying on his taxes. He's been cheating on his self-employment taxes by claiming he has way more business expenses than he actually does. And is lucky that all that was happening during the pandemic, because it was making it harder for the government to really investigate him, because he kind of got away with it, even though it was very obvious that he was lying about his taxes. And he committed perjury in an effort to lie about his taxes, which is not good. But one of the reasons he's lying about his taxes is because he's addicted to spending money on this mobile game called, I think, WWE Superstars or something. And it's a gacha game. It's a like Bejeweled style game. And he spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on this mobile game, and he claims that he doesn't, and he lies about it. But people leaked his bank statements, and you can see from his bank statements that not only is he lying about that, he's spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on that game, he's also spending a lot of money at Total Wine. He's also spending a lot of money on alcohol. So he's an alcoholic, apparently. And he claims that he doesn't go to Total Wine. So anyway, we knew all this information about DarkSydePhil, and we were watching his videos and enjoying them. And so we started talking. Well, Phil lives in Renton, which is not far from here. We might as well go see if we can find him. And it was kind of a joke at first. It was just an idea like, oh yeah, we could go over to Renton and see Phil. But then we started talking about it, and it was like, we know what day he has off, which is Thursday. We know that on Thursdays he goes to Fred Meyer and he goes to Total Wine. And so we could find on Google Maps where he lived, because it's listed as a business. It's listed as a photography studio on Google Maps, and it's called Burnell Productions, and it's in a gated community. And so we were like, okay, we know where he lives, we know what day he has off, we know where he goes on that day off. Why don't we go there and see if we can find him? And so it went from being kind of a joke to being like, actually, no, that would be interesting if we could actually find DarkSydePhil in real life. And by this point, you know, I started this trip knowing nothing about him, pretty much. Now I knew a little bit about him, and I thought he was interesting, and I wanted to see him. And so we set off for Renton yesterday, and when we got there, the first thing we decided to do is go to the Fred Meyer, where he lives. So we went to Fred Meyer, and we went in, got something to drink, we got some gas, and we were kind of excited. It's like, oh, it's the Fred Meyer of DarkSydePhil. And then I plugged in to Google Maps, Burnell Productions, because I was like, well, he wasn't here at Fred Meyer. Let's see if we can get into his gated community. We knew we wouldn't be able to drive in probably, but maybe walk in. But when I Google mapped it, I found that it was like way farther away from Fred Meyer than we thought. And then I realized, oh, we went to the wrong Fred Meyer. There's another Fred Meyer right next to where he lives. So we went to the other Fred Meyer in Renton, unfortunately. But we were like, okay, let's go see if we can find him at home. And so we drove over to Burnell Productions. We couldn't get into the gated community because it was a gate that looked like this, but I managed to take a picture of myself in front of the gate. So this is where DarkSydePhil lives. You just have to get through that gate. And so I was kind of satisfied. I was like, okay, you know, odds are we were never gonna see Phil today, but at least we, you know, got close to where he lived, and I took a picture. And then the only other place left to go was Total Wine, and I was like, where do you guys want to go? And Raleigh said, my friend said, Total Wine. So I was like, okay, we'll go to Total Wine. And Total Wine is not in Renton, it's in Tequila, which is next to Renton. So he has to drive all the way to Tequila to go to Total Wine. So I kind of thought maybe that was less likely that we would find him there, but hey, it was still worth a shot. And so we went to Total Wine. We went in. Raleigh wanted to buy gin because DarkSydePhil drinks gin. He drinks Grey Whale gin. And we found Grey Whale gin. We were in the gin section. And then we got in line to go pay. We didn't buy the Grey Whale, we bought a cheaper kind. He bought it. So we went in line to go pay, and Raleigh sees DarkSydePhil behind us. Now, I had no idea that he saw DarkSydePhil. Otherwise, I would have said something to him. I would have talked to DarkSydePhil. I had no idea any of that was happening. He just saw DarkSydePhil and he was stunned, and he thought there's no way it could be him. That would be too lucky. And he said something about it, but I didn't hear it, and neither did Chase. Neither of the two of us heard Raleigh saying something about DarkSydePhil. And then we left, we got in the car, and Phil came out and he was parked right in front of us in the parking lot. And we were just staring at him through the windshield. And he was getting into a Toyota Corolla. And that's the thing, we knew he had a blue Toyota Corolla from 2017. We knew that car that he had, and he got into that car, and we were like, what? That's DarkSydePhil. And so I actually got out of my car and ran up to go look at him through his window to really see if it was actually DarkSydePhil. I looked at him through the passenger window, and I saw that was unmistakably the face in profile of DarkSydePhil. So I had to take a picture at the Total Wine too. This is the Total Wine in Tequila where I found DarkSydePhil. So anyway, it's basically, that's the whole story. Is we went, I had no real understanding of who DarkSydePhil was other than down the rabbit hole a few years back. And then I came to Washington, learned a whole bunch about DarkSydePhil. And then we were like, let's go see DarkSydePhil. And then we found him, and we found him at the perfect place, which was Total Wine, because it just proves that he's lying, that he does go to Total Wine. He denies that he goes there, but we can see in his bank statement that it says he goes there all the time. And we found him there, And it was just perfect because it was like, that's like the most embarrassing place to find DarkSydePhil, is because it just shows that he's kind of an alcoholic. Or at least he's a heavy drinker. But it was great, and I wish I'd been able to say something to him in line. I wish I'd known that he was right there next to me in the Total Wine, because I would have loved to just have a few words with DarkSydePhil. I knew that I would probably freak him out because he's kind of a paranoid guy, but it would have been worth it just to have a few words with him. But, you know, he was in his car, and I didn't want to, like, knock on the window to get his attention, and that would have been really weird. He would have been really freaked out from that. But yeah, it was just the kind of thing, like, I didn't really know anything about this guy, and then I find out a whole bunch of stuff about him, and then we go see him, and we find him in the perfect spot at 3 p.m. at Total Wine in Tequila, Washington. So it was just a fun story. I didn't get an actual picture of Phil. I got a picture of the Total Wine. I got a picture of his gated community. You know, I also thought it would be weird if he saw me taking a picture of him in his car. I thought that might be a little bit invasive. So, you know, I played it a little bit polite. Perhaps I should have gotten a picture of him. But yeah, it was good. I think Chase might have gotten a picture of the car. I don't know if he did or not. I was unclear about that. If so, then I'll try putting it in here. But yeah, that's just a fun story. I went and saw DarkSydePhil.